Hello, I am Michael Sullivan. I'm the CEO of Life Model Works, and it is my pleasure and great joy to have Jim Wilder as a colleague in this ministry. And we are doing Renovated Lives chats, video chats with some of our friends, some of our dear friends, and we have a dear friend with us right now that Jim's going to introduce to us. But Jim, tell us a little bit first about the book that you have written.
Yes, I'm very pleased to be part of a book called Renovated, going to come out with Nav Press in the spring of 2020, and it's on neuroscience of spiritual life. It's based on my interactions with Dallas Willard at the intersection of spiritual formation and character formation. And this is a topic that's very interesting to us because of the impact it has on actual transformation. You've got an interesting term for this intersection and where the spiritual and the character things come together.
Yeah, I was privileged to be a friend of Dallas's. Met him in the early 90s, and his writings on the classic disciplines was very, very impactful in my life. And so I took that to heart and practiced those disciplines. I'd been practicing them before I read about them, but he just made them come alive in a new way. And so I think of them as humility drills. The purpose of these fundamental disciplines for the spiritual life are to, I think, keep us in our right space, which is a smaller space. We're small, God's big. So the disciplines help us keep that perspective, and it's very, very helpful to getting into an atmosphere and a place, a relational space where we can open up and let the Lord do what he wants to do in our lives. And so we have not only then the humility drills, we have these maturity skills that the life model has elaborated on, and that you and others, Dr. Wilder, have kind of deduced from a lot of the brain science, the latest and best brain science. And so you have humility drills linked then in the new book with relational skills. And these together are, I think, a very dynamic duo.
Well, in preparing the Renovated book, I actually interviewed many people who had experienced both the spiritual disciplines and some kind of brain skill training. And one of the people at that intersection was Amy Pierson. And because of timing, we didn't get a chance to get your interview into the book, Amy. But I want to have a chance to do that today. Dallas Willard was actually a friend of Amy's father. And so Dallas Willard's daughter, Becky, introduced me to Amy when I moved into the area. Amy is someone who's been very active in the spiritual formation field for a long time, been trained in that area. She's an experienced writer on both the topic of spiritual formation and character and the mind. She leads the Burning Hearts workshops, and she brings an artist's point of view, which I've heard her call being at the children's table. And as I understand, Jesus comes to visit the children's table, not just the intellectual table. So this world of relationships, she brings a very unique perspective that I'm looking forward to hearing about today. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks. This is fun.
Yeah, Amy, we enjoy knowing you, and you're making a great impact on our lives. We've had the chance to become friends, and we're so grateful for that. So you're actually one of the advisors in the Dallas Willard ministry in an ongoing way. So you and your dad.
I am. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Dallas and his impact on your life and on your family.
Well, he, because he was a friend of my dad's, and they met through Richard Foster and Renovated, which they're in Colorado, Renovated is. So I had the pleasure of a lot of time with that crowd, and I had no idea. I had no idea who Dallas was. I didn't know he was the Dallas Willard. And so I am grateful for that, because I got to observe as a man and also just mature into my own understanding of what formation was. So it was fun to see him to study under him as part of my certificate program, but then also to see this guy lived one of the most well-integrated lives that I've ever observed. He obviously was brilliant, and yet beyond those constructs of philosophy and the spiritual formation thought leader conversations, he had this really rich understanding of art and nature, gardening, parts of history that really had nothing to do with church history. He was just this deep, deep well. And that was inspiring to me. Just as a person, he made me feel seen. And when I could see these other aspects of him, I felt like, oh, okay, this is the man that I can relate to. And this is encouraging to me in the way that my way of being in the world and in these conversations. So it was really energizing.
I know that you came to the Lord when you were a girl, and some of these spiritual disciplines is where we're going. I know that they were important to you even as a young girl, but tell us a little bit about your journey with spiritual disciplines and how they've benefited you.
I was thinking about this conversation, and you're right. I mean, I was going back and saying, I don't exactly remember a time when there wasn't some form of spiritual discipline in my life. I may not have had that terminology for what they were, but, lots of good study, lots of good teaching. I was discipled by people, reading the word. One of my earliest memories is a teacher giving me that in my Sunday school class, saying I could keep the Bible if I'd read it. And so I went home and colored all of it. I just was so fired up about it. But as time has progressed, when I, for instance, went through the certificate program that I went through, Jan Johnson gave us this assignment to create our spiritual disciplines curriculum for Christ-likeness. And we would have this rule of life that we would follow. You can hear Dallas in that. And inevitably, everyone would kind of front load this huge list of things we were going to do, either for Jesus or with Jesus, whatever the perspective was. And before long, we'd be realizing, no, we just need to breathe in this rhythm with him. And so what I got in the habit of doing just in very real time was spending the beginning of quiet time with the Lord, saying, how do you want to be together today, Lord? And then carrying it forward to be looking for the God sightings throughout the day. So for me, having times where there were solitude and silence, that was hugely important. Dallas used to talk about just an attentiveness, a presence, just in things like nature and quieting and the wonder of all that are, I'm going to jump back and forth because it's all very life model. I just saw so much of a dovetail with what I knew, the listening, paying attention, that I never ever can recall a time where I didn't know God in an interactive way. I grew up, but I always had this sense that he was always speaking all the time, and that my job was just to pay attention. So that's easy when you're a so-called creative. And as Jim said, I thought I was at the children's table because my way of being with God was less heady, less linear. And so I was always looking for, okay, worship, celebrate, let's do these things that reflect our life with God and with one another. And my experience up until Life Model, I hadn't heard that as overtly affirmed in the context of relationship.
Yeah, and that was my next question. So along the journey, people can be really involved in spiritual disciplines, but then all of a sudden you realize along the way, like, we're lacking some human skills.
Yes.
Because Jesus is the human being. He is the ultimate human being, and he's the one who is the Prince of human life. And so, people can be very disciplined and yet not be fully human in a Christ-like way. So this is where the life model kind of intersects and comes in and says, okay, there's these other skills that we need besides the disciplines. Tell us about that intersection in your experience.
Oh my gosh. When I first met Jim and Kitty, it was at the Heart and Soul Conference. I know you said you were there. That I remember I went to that true confession because Dan Johnson and Mindy Calaguar, friends of mine, were doing breakouts, and I thought this is a great excuse to see them and to honor Dallas and Jane. And I had no idea about Life Model. And when I got there, I heard this stuff and I went, oh my gosh, this is the missing piece for me. Because I'd been studying the reveal data that says you cannot be transformed apart from scripture and relationship. Like, I knew there was a piece. You can't experience lasting transformation apart from a relationship. Understood that, but nobody was talking about why that is, which is the attachment stuff. Thank you, Dr. Wilder. And nobody was explaining, okay, so now what? How do we do that?
Yeah. And
some people are just more bent to solve that riddle. But for me, I was thinking, this is huge. This is what people are asking us. This is when I was working for the Spiritual Formation Alliance with my father. And we really didn't have answers. These seemed like very practical, interrelational answers that could make this spiritual life fly in a way that hadn't worked for me under that voluntaristic thing. Again, another concept I was exposed to with Life Model: know the right things, do the right things, be the right kind of person. When I heard that mapped out, I didn't see there wasn't a relational space in that model.
Yeah.
And I know Dallas Willard believed in that relational space desperately needing to be filled. Can I read you something? Is this
of course,
out of line?
Yeah.
I found this because I was thinking about it. This is Spirit of the Disciplines. I thought this was so good, and I wish I could memorize like you guys, but here we go. When we are in isolation from God and not in proper social bonds with others, we cannot rule the earth for good. The idea is simply absurd. Mm. The idea that we're in isolation from God and not in proper bonds with other people socially. I know that's in there. It's obviously in Spirit of the Disciplines, but that was not a conversational hub at the tables that I was pulling up to.
Yeah.
So it's real simple, real practical to me what it offers.
I think we're in on the beginnings of a relational revolution in our culture. Yeah. Because there's been so much dehumanization that's been going on by the forces of culture against us. And so I think we've got an opportunity to kind of be on the vanguard, like Dallas talked about in the Spirit of the Disciplines, to be on the vanguard, to train others, to train the culture in relationships. And when I say it to people, hey, relationships are the currency of the kingdom of heaven or the currency of human life, they go, yeah. But there hasn't, like you said, been enough of a actually breaking that down into, well, what does that actually mean and how do we do that? How do we get there? And this is what the Life Model's kind of been majoring on, taking this whole idea of relationships with God and people and making it practical and getting to the infrastructure beneath what makes relationships healthy and what makes them work.
Yeah.
So
that's so true. And that is, I agree with the just the trend of our cultural attitude is so anti-joy. Yeah. And when you get it down to this simple idea, not that it's simple to do, but it's a very simple concept, and you start to feel it in your body. That's another thing.
Yes.
Dallas talked a lot about embodying this whole process of discipleship. And if we feel in our bodies when we are operating from a joy center, it becomes something we're so familiar with that when we drift away, we immediately recognize, or it doesn't take long. And Dallas talked about, spiritual disciplines are not about earning. They're about effort, not earning.
Yeah.
But you don't drift into it. So to physically think of our bodies as this opportunity to engage with God and other people, that lights up living differently. So I think it's pretty exciting, and it's exciting because it's actually possible. There's stuff you guys are bringing that makes this, to me, come to life in a way that the more linear processes didn't engage.
And you're bringing it to life too with the artistic side. Jim and I probably aren't the greatest artists, but it's wonderful to be associated with people like you.
Poet and musician, everybody's creative. Don't get me started.
Okay, all right, there we go. We confess. We've got this artist hiding inside of us.
Yes, you do.
Okay. Well, Jim, chime in here. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting that when you encountered God, you started writing poetry yourself, Michael. So that's a little indication there. I love listening to Amy teach because she resonates with we're a relational, creative part of what God is doing here, and she knew the people that most of us are impressed by. And we should be impressed, of course, but she knew them as people. And really what the whole idea is, it doesn't really help to be impressed by Jesus if you don't know him as people. And we as folks need to be sort of able to embody that and to express it. And Amy's part of telling the story. That's part of the whole creative arts things. It's helping us to notice the things that are in front of us, but we're not paying any attention to. And to help bring that into our notice just seems to light up her life. And every time I'm around her, I find one of the most curious, active, creative minds that I encounter anywhere. So thank you for being part of this, Amy, and sharing your joy with us. I look forward to the world hearing what you have to say and draw.
Oh, thank you. That's
high. And I do too, Amy. Go ahead. You're going to say something.
Oh, that's just very honoring, and I appreciate that because I really respect what you guys do, and I love the well-roundedness of the two of you and what's going on with Life Model.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, we're excited about Renovated. The subtitle is God, Dallas Willard, and the Church That Transforms. Coming out in the spring of 2020. We'll probably sell some advanced copies as well to our constituency. So be on the lookout for that in the coming days. And Amy Pierson, you're a pleasure. You're a joy. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, guys. Good to be with you.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye.